Last week, Scott Morrison stood in front of the nation, called a royal commission into the abuse of people with a disability, and he shed tears. He shed tears there in the courtyard, and I give him credit for bearing his heart, showing his compassion, and standing up for people with a disability. But this week, Peter Dutton launches a mean, low, despicable attack against a woman with a disability, Ailey France, a mother who lost her leg shielding her child from a car accident. And Mr. Morrison has remained silent. Mr. Morrison has said nothing. You cannot stand in the courtyard and shed a tear for people with a disability and then the very next week turn a blind eye to a low, despicable attack by Peter Dutton against Ailey France. Now, why has Mr. Morrison not stood up to Peter Dutton? Why has Mr. Morrison not demanded that Mr. Dutton apologize, not just to Ailey France, but to all the people who live with a disability in Australia, who struggle to find appropriate accommodation, who have to face the challenge of doing the normal day-to-day tasks all of us take for granted with that extra hurdle that disability brings? Well, quite simply, is Mr. Morrison afraid of Mr. Dutton? Mr. Dutton, after all, is a thug. Mr. Dutton is the most toxic man in the Liberal Party. Mr. Dutton is mean and despicable. And Mr. Dutton came within a few votes of becoming the Liberal Party Prime Minister. This is a Liberal Party that is divided. This is a Liberal Party divided by anger, fear, and loathing for one another. Somebody in the Liberal Party needs to stand up to Peter Dutton. Somebody, that somebody should be Mr. Morrison, the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister, who showed compassion, who showed the nation his heart last week, when he stood there, tears in his eyes, talking about people with a disability, well, Mr. Morrison, I say to you, have the courage of your compassion and your convictions. Tell Peter Dutton to apologize. Apologize to Ailey France. Apologize to all people with a disability. It is the right and the decent thing to do.
Senator, do you think an apology suffice? Should they go further?
An apology is where it needs to start. Does Mr. Morrison not even have the courage to pick up the phone and call Mr. Dutton and say, hey, you remember last week when I said, the Prime Minister said, that was me, Mr. Morrison, that was you saying it. You said we needed a new culture of respect. He should just pick up the phone and say to Mr. Dutton, you remember when I said that? You remember when I said we need a new culture of respect in Australia for people with a disability? Well, what you did, Peter Dutton, was not respectful. It was mean, it was low, it was despicable, it was below the belt. It was wrong. And that's not how this campaign should be conducted, but it's not how anybody should treat a person with a disability. So that's where it needs to start. I am, quite frankly, gobsmacked that Scott Morrison has not yet had the courage to call Mr. Dutton and tell him just basically, that's not respectful and that's not the standard that I want my team to uphold.
Mr. Shorten. Can I ask your question regarding